Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. This is Kero Riri Paddle, and today I'm sitting down with Jamie Morden.
Hello, Kero.
How are you? How are you?
Yeah, I'm pretty good actually. A little busy, sort of day job, putting my cap on for sound design. But other than that, yeah, I'm pretty good.
Cool. Jamie, as plenty of you will know, is the mastermind behind GEOSynths, one of the premier synth and I guess you could say synth culture and lifestyle channels on YouTube. If you're looking for great patches, this is the man that you go to. If you're looking for a get together of different masterminds in the field, he's the one who puts it together. And today I have him on so we can figure out a little bit about the genesis of GeoSynths and figure out his viewpoint on not just synthesizers but music and what it takes to be a producer and a YouTube content creator in today's day and age. Jamie, take it away.
Oh yeah, well, I don't know what to say after that. You great. You made a great intro, so I don't think I can better that really. But yeah, I mean, as you said, I am a self-employed sound designer, and I also do it's a podcast, if you like, a vlog. It's a number of things for YouTube, but it's a weekly kind of show, and that's really an add-on to the sound design. It's more like that's the hobby part of it, but sound design is, no, I put the cap on and I'm down to work. So that's pretty much, to sum it up, really, what I do.
Wicked. So then how about this? Let's go right to the beginning.
Sure.
Do you think you could tell us about how you got into this style of music, synthesizers, and what your earliest pieces were on your musical journey?
Well, I mean, it was like everyone, I sort of got into music. I come from a musical family. Everyone in the family plays something. My mum, my dad, brothers, they all play instruments. I was the first one really to get into kind of electronic kind of sounds. I think that was probably through other media, especially growing up in the, late 70s and 80s. It was, well, the 80s more than anything. You had, lots of electronic music and movies and TV, even like kids shows at school. There'd be, they couldn't afford an orchestra, so they'd get some guy with synthesizers and they'd make this soundtrack to it. And it was always like, oh, what's that? Didn't know what synth was, but I suppose that all changed really when I first heard Gary Newman on Top of the Pops, which is like a UK, well, it was a UK weekly show, which everybody watched, and it was always the latest sort of hits. And, at that kind of time, it was Top of the Pops was very much, we had sort of the end of punk music, and you get like duets and all this sort of stuff, and all of a sudden there's this guy who looks like a robot singing like a robot with all this electronic music, and it was like, wow, that's amazing. That's what I want to kind of get into. So that was sort of earliest memories of synthesizers, really. I guess for me personally, getting into music, that came, I guess, from, well, as a younger kid. Not that you look at me now, but as a younger kid, I was well into the whole breakdancing scene. I was in a crew. There was about 14 of us. Used to go around do shows, but also the usual battles with other crews, doing all sort of all these things. And I loved, a lot of people in the sort of early 80s, they loved all the kind of electro-pop, Depeche Mode and all that type of thing. And apart from, say, Gary Newman, like I mentioned, I was really into like early kind of hip hop and electro music, because it was like using all these sounds, all these synth sounds, but with a lot of funk as well, like Africa Bambaataa, and there was a lot of Grandmaster Flash and all that sort of stuff. So that was the kind of music I was really into. And then I got into DJing. I was probably about 16, 17. There's myself and a couple of other guys. We all bought a record deck each, and we all got together. We'd share the gear every couple of weeks, and it was into like mixing and scratching and all that sort of stuff. But around that sort of time, it was probably about 87. That's when house music just exploded. pretty much nowhere, really. It kind of seemed to me more from electro, and then this elements of disco bringing into this electronic music, and then there we are. You know, it was house music was kind of born, and that really, you know, stood out to me. That was my music for, and that's what I wanted to get involved with. So yeah, used to DJ in a like a fun pub, if you like, in where I'm from, which is Coventry in the UK. And I just got interested then into, I want to make some of this stuff. So I had a pair of decks at home, and then I got like this little Casio sampler, this little cheap SK1 sampler, and a Casio RZ1 drum machine. And then from there, I was able to sample a bass line and use grid paper and figure out what the actual, you know, track was. So I went on a music course. Well, it was a studio course in Birmingham, UK, which was run by guys called The Commission. They used to do remixes for, there was this LP that used to come out every month called Disco Mix Club. It was like an industry type of, it had like remixes and new releases on. So I went over there, and as soon as I walked in the studio, it was like, I'm at home. I knew this was what I wanted to kind of do, really. So yeah, my early stuff was house music. I was awful at it. In fact, I dug it out not long ago and put it up on SoundCloud. The first ever track I did, it was, I knew nothing. I couldn't play a note, and not a lot has changed really, but I couldn't play a note. It was just sampling. It was like like we all did back in the day. But yeah, I fell in love with it then. So that's pretty much how it all kind of started, really.
I like that origin story. It's really cool.
Yeah. Well, we've all got them, haven't we? So, but yeah, it was good fun times, and you know, it's just as well, really, because it's stuck with me ever since, to a point now where, you know, it's what I do for a living. Where back then it was all like it was fun. It was more than fun. It was my kind of identity, really. I'm a DJ, I'm into scratch mixing, you know, constantly thinking about it, and obsessed really to a degree. But back then it was a little bit different. It wasn't just, you know, I'm into techno and that's the thing. You could play house music, you could play hip hop and you know, rap, and you could play lots of different, you know, styles of music within one sort of set, if you like. It's not so divided. I think back then all there was the Chicago house, Detroit techno, and then my favorite, which was the kind of New York scene, which was like Todd Terry and that sort of stuff. So yeah, it was all fun times, definitely.
Nice. No love for acid?
Well, acid came, actually. I remember I was DJing down at this place, Tally Ho it was, and in the morning, what I used to do on a Saturday, I used to go on the train. There's me, like 17-year-old, go on the train, spend all my wages that I earned during the week on vinyl. And it was all imports, and it was all like US imports, if anything. And then I'd be there at 8 o'clock in the morning, waiting for the guy to turn up and open his store. So I'd get the records to then get back, and then we'd start at it was about sort of 1 p.m. in the afternoon, and then we had sort of guest DJs. I mean, I wasn't like a resident there, and I was too young, but the guy that was allowed us to come down, and he just got paid and we did all the work. So, but we loved it, you know what I mean? Hearing all this music really loud and then mixing and scratching and all that sort of stuff. But I remember this DJ turned up and said, "Oh, can I have a go?" And he came up, played 4 records, and it was acid. And that was where it all started to seep in. And acid really took over, well, the whole sort of culture around it sort of blew up, really. It pulled in lots of people who weren't necessarily into the kind of music, but they were into the partying and the whole, you know, because it was quite unique to the UK with this whole sort of illegal parties and everything like that, which, yeah, I went to, you know, but at the end of the day, it was still the sort of music element that I was more into. But yeah, it was fun times, definitely.
It's really nice. It's nice to hear you talk about that because I've seen on TV or I've heard from my parents who like I'm a club rat. They were club rats. They would tell me about stories of what the 80s and the 90s was like for music, and it just DJ culture, how interesting it was, because it was not that it was like new, but it was entering like that stage of what we know it to be today. So I really like hearing people who are still involved with music today, but they started back then, because it's just amazing to see that evolution over time, especially amongst genres that lead to what we have today. Like you can hear an acid line in pop, or you can hear like trance, like stabs, or you can hear like any other sort of like signature sound from those different dance music genres today amongst any other genre. So it's just incredible to see how far things have come.
Yeah, no, definitely. It was a totally brand new sound that I kind of started seeing it change in like 86, 87. That's when it started to change in the kind of underground scene, if you like. In the pops, in the charts, it was still the usual, pop, bubblegum pop and I love you and he loves me and that sort of stuff, and then we started to sort of, probably towards the end of the 80s, start to hear it cross over into the charts. I think there was Mars with Pump Up the Volume. I think that was probably one of the first ones, actually. And that was, sort of getting in the charts with music with no vocals on, no singing. It was just little samples dropped here, there, and everywhere, and a bit of scratching. And those things were kind of fairly sort of new, because you'd have that play on top of the pops. The next track would be a ballad singing about I love you and all that. It was like so contrast. And then, it kind of, the culture, I suppose, pushed it forward. There was this whole dance scene around it, the whole party scene around it all. It wasn't just a style of music. So, but while some people were going into that party side of things, I was more interested in, how is this stuff made? How do you do it? And, it was a fascination. I love these sounds. And at first I was just tinkering with this little sampler, where you got like probably half a second of sample time, and it was the worst quality, but you could sample this sound and then make your own melody from this sound that was just on this record. And it just spurred off creative ideas, especially when you are sort of DJing the scratch mix thing. Back then it was use a 4-track and then you drop a drum loop and then stick a vocal off another thing, and you'd create like a mix tape, if you like. So it seemed like a natural progression. The only thing is there wasn't a lot of people around who were doing it, really. So you're pretty much in isolation. But yeah, it was all good fun, and it just seemed like the natural thing to do.
So fill us in then. From that time up until what you're doing with GEOSynths, there was definitely an in-between.
Oh, God, yeah. There's lots of stuff going on in between that. Maybe not that interesting. I moved from where I was in the Midlands to the town that I'm actually in now. And I did the usual thing, just went into a normal kind of job. Well, I say normal, it was working in casinos, but I met there a singer. So we just ended up writing our own tracks together. And at that time, it was very much kind of, if you know, people like Lisa Stansfield, and there was bands like M People, and it was very sort of poppy, upbeat dance music with the usual structure of verse, bridge, chorus, middle eight, that sort of stuff. So we just wrote music with the idea, really, we wanted to try and get signed. And then I used to use this recording studio, because back then you couldn't do it in your own house. It was the gear wasn't available. If it was silly money. So you had to, I had keyboards and synths, but I had to take them to this studio. So I ended up working at this studio, which originally I used to hire from. He said, well, just leave your gear here. And, so we did our own music, did the thing of sending tapes off, and we saw record companies, management companies, and we finally did get, we got on like magazines, and there was a magazine called Future Music, and they used to have this CD on the front cover, and it was like they'd pick 3 or 4 demos from they call them readers demos, and so you'd send in a CD or a tape or DAT tape as it was back then, and we got on one of those, which was quite interesting, and then there was a competition, a radio competition, and it was to write your own track, and the winner would get signed and all this type of stuff. It was really sort of elaborate. So we did this track, and it was the cheesiest dance track we've ever done. It probably took about 4 hours to write music and lyrics. It was very, very sugary as well. And we sent it in, and we won the thing. And then, so we ended up going to this company. It was all like, Warner Brothers and all this lot, and champagne was out and all that sort of thing, signed the contracts. But we did that, and it all just turned into a bit of a nightmare. And then this company and the radio station sued each other, and we were in the middle, and and at that point we thought, you know what, we've been trying this for a few years now, trying to get signed, and apart from like moving down to London, where everything was, it just seemed like, we're not going to really get anywhere with it. And this was probably late 90s, something like that. And so we just decided, you know what, let's go out and make some money. So we ended up just going out and gigging just around the sort of north of England. Originally, we did some of our own music and then some covers, but then we just stopped doing our own and just did covers. And I did that for like 10 years, gigging around, and some cheesy songs I had to sing and play over, but the money was all right. So that kind of what we earned for the gigging side of things paid for everything in the house, because we ended up getting together anyway, but paid for the mortgage and all that sort of stuff. And then what I did a day job during the week as well, and that just paid for the odd few toys and stuff like that. And I had a lovely studio in my back garden, which was like a log cabin, which I soundproofed. It was great. And then so we did that, went our own separate ways, sort of 2006-ish, something like that, and I moved back down to the Midlands, and then music was just put on hold, really. I was quite into creative work then. I was a web designer at that time, and then I moved probably a couple of years after that into, the whole video side of things on the internet started to happen. The bandwidth and download speeds were getting better. So we could actually do things that moved, and it wasn't just flash animations or anything like that. So I joined this company, I think it was 2008, was it? Something like that. And we started doing video adverts for just companies. So we'd go around, a videographer to film a bit of a business and all that sort of stuff. So for many years, my kind of music just went on the back burner, and I just went and got into video, and that's a whole world of its own anyway, that takes up all your time, how to use cameras and all that sort of stuff. So and I did that from about 2008 and then I joined another company, Yellow Pages, actually, in 2009, and then in 2016, I got laid off from that place. Also, the rest of the sort of team did. But I say rest of the team, there was only one other fella who worked for me. So they just give that to a third-party freelance. It was just cheaper. And to be fair, it wasn't really selling that well. It was too expensive. And just before I'd got sort of laid off, I was seeing some customers up in Glasgow. Well, Scotland as a whole. I used to go organise meetups with customers at their business, go and sort of have like a recce meeting really with them and talk about their business, and then we'd shoot it some time later in the future. So I did about 3 or 4 customers, and I noticed that one of the music shops, Guitar up in Glasgow, had it was a Dave Smith OB6 synthesizer in, and I thought, right, I'll go and check this out. And they plugged it into the PA, and it was like, oh, this is amazing. It was like, the angels had come down, and like it was singing. I was so happy, and I had to buy it, so I bought it, and I started making some sounds on it. And I'd already done some sounds for like a Bass Station 2 and released those for free, really. And then I did some for the OB6 and shared them. People saying, "Oh, you should do a bank about this. You should, you know." And I thought, well, I'll give it a go. So I did it, and it started selling okay. So when I got told I was being sort of made redundant, as we call it in the UK, laid off, I had this severance package, and I thought, okay, I can either buy the latest 4K cameras, because I had some cameras, but they weren't like 4K. The 4K ones were at work. So I could either update all my gear, and if you think synthesizers are expensive, you should look at the camera world, especially, you know, decent size cameras with all the ports. You know, Blackmagic have been great recently, but back, you know, a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, there wasn't really a huge. You had to, the big Canons or Sonys, you're looking silly money, and so it was either that or give this sound design thing a bit of a go. And luckily, as we found out recently with synthesizers, probably the past 6 years, there's been this whole renaissance of analog synthesizers, and because everything for quite a while was going virtual analog, and you know that was going to be the future, and VSTs and AUs and all that sort of stuff. The idea of actual analog hardware again, especially polysynths, was you know, we didn't think that was going to happen again. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to sell some of my synths that I had. So some of the older synths I had, and things that are probably more higher price, like the Core Kronos and a lot of other sort of things like that, a few Moogs and things. And I sold those to get some money with my severance, and then decided to buy some of the latest gear to make sounds on. And that wasn't quite enough. I also then had to sell my house and then move. So that was to build the funds to go and do it, you know, as an official business. It's not like a sideline or anything like that I don't tell the tax man. You know, it's an official business that I've been doing now 3 years. So so I moved back to where in the up north, Blackpool, where I am now, and got an office in a council building, and then started GEOSynths, and I've been doing it ever since.
That is incredible. I have to admit, like, I love the entrepreneurial spirit, and I especially love when an artist is able to create and also still be very business savvy. What you just told me, and what I've also seen with your show over time, it's all characteristic of someone who did take a huge leap of faith, and they took what some people would consider a bad situation, and they made it into, I assume, a really great one. Like,
yeah, I mean, it was a massive risk, and to a degree still is. You know, there's you know, obviously there's a lot more synths that have come out, which also means a lot more sound designers, and that's great. You know, I'm not hugely into sound designers who have been doing it for years, but they don't do it officially because they just charge peanuts for it. And I don't think I charge a lot anyhow, especially if you think of, say, for instance, you know, a bank of patches could take a couple of months to make. But yeah, it was definitely in 2016, it was 2017, it was a massive risk. Sell your house and all that kind of thing, and giving up video production, which is what I knew about, you know, and then starting something completely new. So, but yeah, it's been all right. It's been good.
And I will say that the content that you put out, the work that you put out, is extremely good, and it's very thorough. Something that I've noticed with other patch creators, not to like belittle their work or anything, but for a lot of them, it seems like they find the new trendy synth, they put out some patches, they have the cool YouTube videos so that they can also get the views, bring people to their channel, and then you never hear them talk about this synth again. You never hear them bring up the patches that they've made. Around 2018, I'd say 2018, 2019, I was making a career change. And I was looking to incorporate my creativity, music, as much as I possibly could. And having been in retail and then having been in marketing and fintech for so long, I felt that longing to go back to what I was doing before, and I came across the System 8, the OB6, the Prophet 6, even like a couple older synths like the King Korg and so on, and I really wanted to get back into music and hardware synthesizers. The System 8 especially, for me, like that is just such a, everything about it, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
I know a lot of people don't like the flashing lights and the 4 octaves and the plastic, but for me, I look at it and like I consider myself a modern musician, and it works for me. Your videos, however, that is what solidified my want for that synth, because not only what you did with the OB6, which was incredible, it sounds like you're putting together pieces of music and art to go along with the fact that this is a product that you're selling, but you're showing the full capabilities of this synth. I don't think anyone makes better patches for the System 8 than you. I don't think anyone makes better patches for the OB6 or the King Korg than you. A lot of people did say the King Korg was, it had its issues or whatever, and it's like, look at the sound. Look at how it inspires you. I love guitar. I would be lying if I said all of my guitars are of the same quality. Some guitars I know that I bought for $300 are nothing compared to my American or my custom shop models, but that doesn't mean that when I pick up that cheaper guitar, it doesn't inspire me. It doesn't bring me to a different place. And I feel that for a lot of keys players, we tend to look at the capabilities of a synth, and we don't look at how we can expand it and how we can express ourselves through it. But that's exactly what you do with your patches. And just even with the DeepMind, I don't think anyone showed off the true capabilities of the DeepMind like you. It's incredible. How do you put yourself in that headspace to really delve deep into a synth and create something that you know others will be as engaged with as you were?
Well, actually, it's hey, thank you very much for that. That's very nice and very kind of you to say. My kind of idea behind sound design is I don't really get. I think if you start thinking about what will people like, you're going down the wrong avenue. I sit and make sounds that I like, and if I make something and I don't like it, no one else is going to get to hear it. So I've got to like the sound before it becomes part of a sort of bank, because it has to sort of move me. In my mind, they're like mini little tracks. Instead of spending like a couple of weeks or whatever writing a track, I've got a sound, and it's like, yes, that accomplishment you get after finishing a track, it's very similar. It's just a lot quicker. I think I don't do genre specific sounds because that can, I don't know, it's probably because I don't know all the genres. I just make synthetic sounds that move me, and you mentioned earlier about inspire, and that's what it is. I want people who buy the patches to they load it all up, and I know this because I get emails from people, but they'll go, oh, that patch there, I wrote a track with it straight away. And it does it. We are sort of, a lot of us, we're inspired by the sound that we hear, and then that kicks off ideas, and that's how it's the jumping off points. I mean, some people are against presets, but at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, presets do sell synths. They do. There's lots of synthesizers in the history who've had sort of not so great presets, and they haven't sold. They've had to then later on get somebody in to get some decent sounds out of it. Not that I'd really do anything like that, as in, sort of factory patches and then the synth goes out to the world. Everything I pretty much do is third party. I mean, I've been hired by Moog for the Moog 1. I did a bank of classic patches. It was just like 50 patches, and say classic, there were some well-known ones in there. They just did a spreadsheet with any, a list of tracks that they would like. And then with the Moog 1, you can create 3 different sounds for each patch, if you like. So there was that and innovation. But generally, no, my idea is I sit down and I make, if it's, I don't think about it too much. I think, okay, I'm going to do a pad now because I haven't done one for a while or something. And I do lots of pads, of course I do. But it puts me in a kind of space. I like to, it invokes sort of imagery and color and that type of thing. And I sort of use that as my guide in, I can hear these little sort of. My philosophy is keep it moving constantly, even if you can't even perceive it. There might be just an LFO just slightly quivering on the pitch a little bit, or the filter. So that's really kind of my thoughts behind it. But it's purely, if I don't like it, I'm not one of these that, that'll do. I can't do that. I have to like it.
I want to kind of go back, but also go forward. Back to talking about the huge step you took, selling your house and banking everything on what you're doing now, and talking about what you are doing and how much your channel has expanded and grown. Your day job is creating these patches and creating tools that will help musicians on a day-to-day basis, but you also take time out of your day to manage a Facebook group that it seems like every week that goes by there's more and more discussion about so many different things, not even just about synths but also about like production, other styles of music. Quickly that group has become one of my favorites when it comes to talking about like anything music related or getting someone's opinions, things about like holding onto the boxes for your synths when you're moving. Like topics like that are so fun to bring up, because I feel like we as musicians, sometimes we lock ourselves away working on tracks or trying to figure out when the next gig is going to happen, especially during this time. And we forget that it's a community that we're in, and you create that. You've created that community through social media platforms. Your synth show and your synth jams, those shows are really taking people, even like what you're doing with me right now. You're taking creators that can have 20 followers or 20,000 followers, and you're bringing them into a space where they can talk about what the news with this synth is, or like what their approach is to music. And I find that incredible. If more YouTubers were that communal, I think the environment that we have would be a better place to be. There is a lot of toxicity when it comes to any sort of online platform, but you handle it very, very well. When you decided to start these additional channels, what was your thinking? You just celebrated the 100th episode of Synth Show, and I think you're going to have many more. What did you think of when you first started?
Well, I mean, YouTube come about, what, around 2006, something. That's when I started with it. And it was just purely a lot of, the videos were just like, I was like the voice of God. You never saw me. It was just a voice talking, and you saw my hands, and that was about it. Because, obviously privacy and all that type of thing. But I didn't do anything regular. It was like there'd be months would go by and I'd do something. And I mean, it's been like that for a number of years, really, up until when I moved up here and I got the studio, which was the office I converted. That I decided, end of the day, YouTube's great as a way to market my sounds. So I was doing, that was one of the first things I did. There's been others since, but I think I was the first one to, if I made a bank of 128 patches, then I demonstrated every single sound. It wasn't like, some of them, they'll do a track with their sounds, which is great, but then you might only hear a handful. And so I decided to do that. But then to expand it more with, all right, I'm working on this synth, so why don't I do some tutorials? So I did some tutorials teaching people how to design sounds from scratch. And then the odd review. And reviews are a funny one, because you just get views, whether you like it or not. You get people watching it, because a lot of people, especially in this game and even in the camera industry, anything where there's an item, people like to talk about synths and not necessarily what you kind of do with them, if you know what I mean. I don't mean that in a negative sense, but we like to say, that synth's rubbish. That one's good. Why is it rubbish? And then sometimes, yes, it can go into toxicity from there. But so I was doing these reviews, and then I I was doing a lot of guitar effect reviews, which is how I got the name GEOSynths, guitar effects on synths.
Very clever, by the way.
Yeah, well, people were thinking, Geo, it's like the world. No, I wasn't clever enough to think anything like that. It was just it was like these guitar effects I was using, and that seemed to go well. But the problem was, I had to keep buying guitar effects. So, and So I don't know how many I did, about like 9 or 10, something like that. And but when I moved, I thought, yeah, I'll market it, the sounds. And I started as well doing live streams while I was making sounds, because I'm sitting here all day, making whatever, 7 or 8 patches in a day, depending on the synth. So I thought, I'll just do a live stream and at the same time. And so I started doing that. Sorry, my cat's just coming. Started doing that, and people were at the same time were asking, what do you think about this latest synth? And then I'd give my opinion, and then other people. And it seemed like a natural thing to then turn it into something a little bit more. I mean, I didn't think, I was going to make it a show. Cheesy, that reminds me of shows. But anyway, so I started, I picked a Sunday, to do it, because I wasn't doing really anything. And it became a bit more structured. And it was just the first, in fact, with it being 100 shows, I did like a little montage of some of the people I've had on. But it was funny going back to them all, because once I do a show, I don't really look back at it, mainly because I cringe at myself. But I try not to look back at them all. But I looked at it and I think, wow, that's how it started. It was just sound design. But then it kind of morphed probably around sort of show 20. I was thinking, right, this is getting a bit more kind of serious. It's a challenge to keep doing it every single week. It's like anything. Sometimes you're really up for doing it. Other times it's like, oh, wow, I'd rather just chill out and watch the TV for a bit. But, you have to do it. And it's been great I enjoy having guests on. I really means, nothing having like real famous people on or not that I really have, but there's been some notable people on there. Or if someone, like you said, have just got 1 subscriber, everyone's got a story to tell. Everyone's into things and you can learn from people each time. And I think I made it that way because back from my video days, I'd be interviewing businesses and their customers for testimonials and that sort of stuff. So the interviewing part came quite naturally to bring that in, to then, have it all around sort of the news of synthesizers to a degree. And at the end of the day, the news, we've all seen what the latest synth is. That's really, it's neither here nor there, I think. I think it's a reason for everyone in the audience to kind of focus a little bit, we're talking about this synth, you can put your opinion. But I think it's more to do with the community aspect, and then to find out about other people's stories that, and like I say, it can be anybody. And I think the audience can see themselves in that, that guest, really. Rather than just having a kind of YouTube personality on who's going to be selling something. So I just try and keep it real. I think that's the deal, really.
And you're doing a great job of that.
Oh, well, thank you very much.
So let's step away from music for a quick moment. Aside from music, what other hobbies do you have? You've mentioned, obviously, video, photography. That was your career, I guess a hobby as well. But what else are you into?
Well, do you know what? Well, there's the thing. When you are self-employed and you are running your own business, you don't stop thinking about it. And you were, I tried to take Mondays off, but I'm still doing things, you know what I mean? Even if it might be just like repatching cables or something, but you never stop thinking about it. You'll probably find with you doing these shows and these interviews that, even when it's not a day to do it, you're still thinking about it. You're prepping in your mind I'm constantly, it never stops. So
absolutely. I'm supposed to take Mondays off as well. And my Mondays end up being sending emails, making sure everything's ready for my Tuesdays, looking at what I did on Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah, totally. And the more that you end up doing it, especially on YouTube, you will start getting a lot more people contacting you, asking you for your opinion on things. Oh, I'm thinking about this synth or that synth. And you could just ignore people. And it depends, on how sort of people contact you. If they're just sending you a wall of text, I mean, the chances are I probably won't read all that kind of thing. But it's just thinking about it as well. It's thinking about what you're going to do next. What guest would be great to have on, and who would you think you'd be able to get on with, and and you never stop, especially if you are doing it. I mean, if you've just got a job during the week and that pays for your bills, then this is for a bit of fun. Then it's different. But when it's, when it's your kind of business, then that's it. You don't stop. So other than that, I wouldn't say there's a great deal that I do. I mean, I'd love to get back out and do some video work, filming stuff. And I kind of did meet up with a couple of groups to do sort of, for fun, bit of short films and that sort of stuff. But it just ended up being lots of people getting together and just talking about it and not doing anything. And I'd turn up each week and it'd be like, okay, so what, are we going to shoot something? It was just they're all just getting together to just talk about what project we could do. And it was very detailed as well. Like, I'll do the script and I'm writing the script, but nothing happened. And I can't start. My approach is, right, I've got an idea. Let's just do it. Obviously you flesh it out a little bit and organize, but it's so easy to just talk about things and not actually do them.
Yeah, and I feel that with me, if I could share a little bit of like my approach with this channel, over like my 20s, I've always loved being creative, whether it was playing music or writing a score to someone's YouTube skit or something, or performing, or even doing YouTube for other channels. I've done a lot of collaborative stuff 3-5 years ago, and when it came time to actually do something that I was very much interested in, or I wanted to like flesh out a particular idea, it's extremely hard to bring other people on and have you guys all be on the same page when it comes to actually having some sort of output, because it's easy. In my opinion, the easiest thing for anyone to do, whether it's music or business or anything, it's plan what you want to do, write out what you want to do, and organize what you're supposed to do. The hardest thing is actually doing it and seeing it all the way through. Like, how many people do we know that have wanted to put out an album and they never put out that album? And it's okay to make music for yourself, but at some point when you want to do this and you think that buying these products or setting aside 8 hours a day on the weekend or whatever to record these songs is going to lead to something, and it never does, and you're working with a vocalist and the vocalist isn't giving you the backing vocals and they're talking about what they want to do but they're not actually doing it, it makes you wonder, like, why am I putting so much time into doing something with others, or even putting so much time into something that I'm not putting out at the end of the day? So I think working solo, especially nowadays, it's easier, and maybe it's better in the long run. I'm not sure.
It could well be. I mean, to get things off the ground, there's no one going to do it better than yourself. Because you've got the energy to get it from A to B, from B to C. I think you do need to bring in other people for their advice, even if it is just a kind of refresher, and make you look at, because sometimes you can go down an avenue and stick to it because you think, it's been my idea, but sometimes you just got to retrace it, and you will make mistakes and do the wrong thing. I mean, there's lots of synths I've worked on which have been absolute flops for me financially, but it's still taken me 2 months to make them. And there's other things that I've tried. The reviews, I could really do lots more of reviews, and get the views, but I don't chase views. I mean, there's lots of people out there who've got to, I'm only just over 10,000 subs. Lots of people have got to that in 6 months. I've been doing this for years, so I'm not chasing that. I value every single one who's there and joining, because they could be there for different reasons. Some really like the sound design, but they're not particularly interested in the show side of stuff, and then vice versa. So yeah, you're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna fall down, but as long as you've got the sort of passion and stick with it. I mean, for you, your core thing that stands out to me is your ability to interview. Not everyone can do that. And come up with interesting questions and have the sort of interest to do that. There's not a lot of that really on YouTube, or what I see, or it's more of a kind of, the interview scenarios are to promote something, a product or something like that. So, you've just got to use your passion and stick with it, and then get advice every now and again. But yeah, it's all down to yourself. End of the day, I think, really.
Thank you for that compliment, and I agree with you. Do you envision that as GeoSynths continues to grow, that you may bring some people on to help with other aspects of the show, whether it's creating like a Thursday special with Timmy, or like a Sunday thing with Julie?
I have, yeah. It has been something that I've thought about for a while, really, and it's a tricky one. Probably even over a year ago, I was thinking of doing something. More on the live stuff, because I got into live streaming with the company that I joined in 2008. The internet was just slow as hell then, but I remember going and visiting a company, and they had a studio, and they were broadcasting over the internet back then, and it was proper programming. It was TV, but for the net, and I was amazed by it, and I knew then streaming was going to be, a massive part of the future. I didn't think it'd take as long as it has done, for individuals to stream. I don't mean companies. So I've been sort of messing around. There's been Synth Show jams that I recently tried, and that's an interesting one. It was on a Saturday I started. We did like 5 shows. I brought in Lisa Inky, who's she was one of my first guests, and we're sort of very similar, lived in the same sort of town around that, and got into DJing, so we're on the same page as a lot of things. But that was dedicated to hardware jams, because I really like that. I'm a fan of playing other people's jams, and of course, you can kind of play jams on a show because they're not copyrighted. So, playing actual recorded tracks, then no, it's a different matter. But there's been that, and there's other ideas I've got for it as well. I just think it's got to be the right thing, really. I think in our game, I'm finding that people are more interested in talking about the equipment than actually the end result of other people's music. I think, because if you think about it, listening to somebody's track for 5-6 minutes, that's a long time these days, isn't it? Usually in 5-6 minutes, someone's got their iPad going, they've got their phone going, they've got a million different things doing at the same time. But yeah, I think people like to talk about it rather than, because really what we've done with it is it's really been a podcast. So you don't actually need to watch us; you can just listen to it. So that's something we're talking about now, things to change. It's actually going to be tagged on to the end of my Sunday show now, rather than a separate day. Because as well, that's taken up 2 of my days of my weekend. And while I use, to a degree, well, the Synth Show was going to be about, doing little ads talking about my sounds, but most of the time I forget to say anything about them. So there's not a lot of, it doesn't make any money, apart from the odd advert you might get on YouTube. But I don't put ads on the streams anymore, because I know it was doing other people's heads in, and it was doing mine in as well. I didn't like watching ads on a big sort of 2-hour stream that are popping up every now and again. It was like, no. So there's not really any sort of financial element to it all, apart from the support I get on Patreon. But I do have some other ideas for it, but it's got to be a bit more thought out, I think.
Well, we're grateful for what you do, and I know it's not just me, but many of us are looking forward to whatever is next. So.
Excellent. Thank you.
Behringer. Or is it Behringer?
Yeah, well, that's it, Behringer. Somebody pointed out to me in the chat, oh, you're saying it wrong, Behringer. And because it was all Behringer.
Yeah, I'm never going to say Behringer.
Nah. Everyone really knows it's Behringer better, doesn't it? Yeah.
This company has been making waves for quite some time, but the tsunami is about to hit. I am really looking forward to what they do. I mentioned a little bit when I appeared on your show, episode 99, how I feel about what's coming next, but I don't think we really truly realize how this is going to impact the hardware community and how it's going to grow the hardware community. I want to hear your opinions about it. What do you think about the future with synthesizers and how Behringer fits into it?
Well, I mean, they've certainly kicked everyone up the backside, or all the manufacturers, because before really, I mean, it's really Korg that kicked off the whole analog side again, with their little Monotron and then the Volkers and that sort of stuff. They started small, but prior to that, it was everything was going to be VSTs, or they will be modeled virtual analog. And for a long while it was, with like Nord and Novation doing things like that. So Korg started it back off again. But everyone with Behringer, for whatever reason, you know, they've always had a bit of a rep in some corners for being, you know, knockoffs and all that sort of stuff. And everyone was, I think people want them to fail. You kind of get it in every industry, really, but it's in the video industry, there's always like people are knocking Canon because they're always crippling something every single release they come out with. So every sort of industry has, or not them. When they came out with the DeepMind 12, I remember when the first videos were popping up, because that was their first synth. And let's not forget, it was made by the Midas team. But when the videos started coming up, it was, people were going, "Oh, it's a monosynth. You know, it's going to be, you know, it won't be anything. You can install patches. It'll be about $1,000, something like that." But then we found out it was a 12-voice analog synth. And it was about £1,000, and I got one of the first ones in the UK. It came, there was no advertising or styling on it. It was just a white box that it came with, and I tell you, that was a really good synth for me to make sounds on. I gelled with it really easy because I love effects. I'm not one of these that turn off the effects. Oh, I want to hear that sound dry. No, effects are a part of the sound. I mean, if you think about it, a filter is an effect, distortion is, overdrive. So I kind of got into using, because that DeepMind 12 really is about effects. That's where you can really boost that sound up. So I thought that was, and I still do. In fact, to a point, I bought another one. You know, I think they're great synths. Then the whole bringing in and making, you know, remakes and that sort of thing. You know, we're not going to buy those synths unless you've got silly money and you're, you know, you've got money to burn on like a remake of a Mini Moog or something like that. And while they might not sound exactly or identical, they still sound pretty good. And when you look at the price of them, you know, what's not to like about getting those synths in? I mean, yes, people start talking about the ethics and all that side of things, but, you know, I've got more things to worry about in my life than what a synth manufacturer is doing. You know, so end of the day, you don't like what they do, don't buy it. Well, I don't need to hear it. I'm interested in what they do. In fact, I've got, wow, how many have I got? I've got quite a lot of their synths. And I've sampled them, and so yeah, I'm not against anything they kind of really do. Yeah, some of the marketing things were a little bit risque and a bit over the top, but whether that was down to the actual owner or somebody in their marketing team, who knows? I don't know. I try not to get into that politics side of things, because politics is in every aspect of our lives now, and it's a bit, you know, it's too much. There's only so much my brain can grab attention of.
Yeah.
But yeah, going forward, I think the test for them will be the polysynths. Yeah. Once they do the OBXA or their version of it, and there's about to be a Prophet 5, there's going to be, you know, a lot more. And if they do them well, then yeah, they'll mop up things. And maybe that's what we've needed, is someone, whether we like it or not, to actually, like I say, give this industry a bit of a kick up the backside. And we're not just used to spending whatever £1,500 on a synth that plays one note.
Absolutely. I feel like at a certain point with every industry, you're going to find growth when someone comes and they start to light a couple flames. And like, I love Roland. I really do love Roland. I've said so many times. I love Korg. I have a lot of their products. I'm going to continue buying their products. I like what they're doing. But I can't help but feel when you start buying into any brand, you start looking back at its history, right? I love shoes. I have hundreds of shoes, and I can tell you a lot about Nike. I can also tell you for a fact that Nike read their demographics very well. They looked at what the competition was doing, and they started reissuing their older shoes that were popular in the 80s and 90s and so on. And obviously they would sometimes put a 90% reissue, or sometimes they do a 1v1 reissue. We're not going to get those reissues, and we're not going to get those re-releases. Roland, if they ever put out the Jupiter 8, which I think one day they will, I truly do, but I believe that will be their end game. I believe the analog synth thing that they do, if it comes out anytime soon, I'll be very impressed, and I would love to eat my words. But they have for years seen what Korg has been doing. They've been reissuing their old analogs, and they're putting out new product that is analog, and a lot of people are going to Korg for that. Behringer is doing the same thing. We are all anticipating what they do next, and I think they're really going to hit it out of the ballpark. But I look at Roland and I wonder, like, why won't you give us what we want? No one's asking for you to release 8 poly synths that are all analog within a 5-year period, like in the early 80s. Like, no one expects that to happen. But give us something. Yamaha, give us what we want. Where's that CS80? You know, like, where's a DX7 that is actually something that we want to use, that has a good interface? You know, I think the Modi X and the Motif were great, but like, that was also a different demographic, and it didn't really answer a question that didn't answer the questions that we've been asking. So as much as like I love the System 8, and I personally think that's one of their best synths that they have ever put out, I do know that analog is knocking on the door, and it may not be here forever, but why have Behringer come in and eradicate all the competition and put them in such a place where you won't be able to compete when the next wave comes? I really wonder that.
Well, it is interesting. We've asked for years and years for Roland to do things, even when they first, what was the MC303, I think it was, and how many different digital versions they've done of that synth, and all the other sort of synths. They have their own way of doing things. And of course, we've got to think about that really the whole synthesizer industry, community, whatever you want to call it. We are very small. We are a niche. You know, a niche of a niche, if you like. So for a company to really just, I mean, I've no idea. Maybe Roland just sells more accordions or electric pianos. Who knows? It would take a lot for a company, especially companies that we've known for like Korgs and Japan, Roland and all that, to do these synths and then they flop. It's a lot of money in R&D, so I can understand why Roland are doing what they're doing with like Zencore, that it all swaps from hardware unit to other hardware unit and the software. And actually, cloud is really good now. It's so the amount of stuff that's on there is quite amazing. But in sort of hardware, I mean, we were seeing clones before. They were coming, but they weren't cheap. If you wanted, there was like Analog Solutions. They sort of did variations, if you like, of things like the SEM module, and bringing back some of that. In modular world, there's lots of clones of Moog filters and you know, all these different designs, oscillators and things. So we've kind of seen them, but we haven't had a company that's been able to mass produce. And whether we like it or not, Behringer are probably one of the only ones that are able to do it, because they've got lots of different companies that may or may not be paying for all this for them to do it cheap. I mean, I remember watching before all these synths were announced, Uli doing a live stream and one of his shows or something. He was saying he's going all in, and you know, totally believed him, and he has gone all in with it all. there's been a lots of things, and I'm quite happy with them. Yeah, there's been a bit of issues here, there, but there is with everything. Pretty much all the decent synths I've got, and I say decent, I mean the more higher priced ones, I've had problems with them. So it's a physical unit. Something's going to go wrong. Yeah, it's unfortunate that the company goes and does things that like copies an existing product. But then again, don't buy it. You don't want it. Don't buy it. That's you're in control of the success or not of a product or what a company does. If they come out with a product and you don't buy it, people don't buy it. If it fails, so you have to vote with your wallet. But I'm happy with what they do, and I am looking forward to them bringing it, because I'll never buy an old Oberheim or because of the price now of them, but also the upkeep, paying for repairs and all that sort of stuff. And then it doesn't have like effects built in, so you have to add those on. The fact that you can get something that's a sound that's similar, why not?
Exactly. I've seen some really nice vintage hardware that I slept on it a couple days. And like I have like a space thing, but also I need to consider like if I'm moving, I don't want to move with so many like huge synthesizers, or if I'm moving overseas, I don't want to store something over here and then come back to it 2 years later and I haven't done anything with it. So when I look at these older synths, I want to get them, but I think just like you, the upkeep, the thousands of dollars for something that will die eventually. Even if you repair it, at some point it's going to die.
Yeah, there is. I mean, I had a few of that, because for a while that's all you could. You got for a while in my studio, it was like workstations and then the odd bit of vintage gear, and then you start buying a bit more of that. But I sold all that to when I moved and started GEOSynths really. And then I just buy new stuff, and I'm happy with that. There's so much of it. It's a great time now for synthesizers.
Amazing time.
Yeah, definitely. There's so much choice out there, and overall, they're all pretty good. I'd like to see maybe a bit more kind of experimentation in some things, especially to see if they can take things like analog a little bit further, rather than just recreating one for one and adding USB. That you can, what would have happened, in that time, if they had this technology now, would they have just made it how they did? Probably not. So there's some kind of reissues that I'm thinking, well, why don't you add some things to it? But it's a tricky one, really, because other people say that. They'll say, oh, it's great, it's analog, but it hasn't got stereo on it, or it hasn't got effects. Why don't they do something new like they do with digital? And then you'll see something like like a Quantum, which has got everything in it in terms of digital, and go, well, it's just a VST in a box, to minimize it completely. And I just think for a lot of us, there's no pleasing us really, but it'd be great to see a bit more innovation. Yeah,
we're a fickle bunch.
Yeah, but, sure, but it's not cheap, is it? At the end of the day, I mean, I think. For Behringer, I'd love them to follow up with that DeepMind 12, but I know Rob Belcham, who was really the guy that designed it, he's no longer with them. So for whatever reason, so whether that actually materializes, I don't know. But yeah, I mean, I just love sounds. That's the thing. It's just they're challenges to me. They're it's the starting off with this initial sound, which is just bright and uninspiring. And then, it's like a statue, you're chipping away at the marble to reveal what the image is. And it's very much like that for me for sound design. And sometimes I'll go down a path where I want to explore an idea, and other times it just appears to me and it's like, oh, there we go. Save.
Nice. Yeah, I like that output. Just to close off that idea before I ask you a few last questions, I hope that with what we see going forward with synths is that it's, like you said, innovation. When they were releasing them in the 80s and the 90s, 70s, it was about the future. It wasn't about the past, and the past is great, but you can still do what was done in the past, but still think about like what can this do in the future. And adding a USB port isn't that. Adding a VST librarian isn't that at all. So I really hope companies throughout the 20s release really innovative hardware, because I need that. I've spoken to other musicians, like we're all in our 20s, and we we're just getting to the point where we can spend a little bit of money. We have a little bit of time.
Well, that's the thing. They're not cheap, and you can get a VST for next to nothing or nothing, depends on your methods. And not pay anything, and you can get away starting doing music straight away. I mean, it wasn't the case in the 80s. You couldn't. You had to save. You had to work for 6 months with overtime, and then you bought something, and I guess in the 80s, it was all about the future. It was a very kind of, there's elements of being optimistic in the sort of late 80s onwards, especially when like things like the Berlin Wall all came down and we weren't all going to get nuked, because it was a very real prospect then. So it was a bit more kind of optimistic, and the future was what we're all looking for. We all wanted synths that were all nice displays on them. We didn't want loads of knobs on them. All those old synths with loads of knobs, they were kind of like what you'd find in a university or something. It wasn't the future. So of course that sort of panned out a little bit different. But yeah, it's interesting what's going to kind of come next. I mean, it's come full circle, hasn't it? And I guess for manufacturers, they've got to work out, okay, we've got a limited amount of people that are into hardware, where the majority are probably into the software because it's easy access and cheaper. But yeah, you're totally right about a certain age. If you're 18, you're not going to have like a couple of grand to go out and spend on a hardware synth. You're not going to do that. That all comes later with, grinding and working hard. But then if you look at it, the sort of prices, a couple of grand for a synth these days. But, if you think of my first one I bought I got a DX7 Mark II. I had that for 2 weeks and took it back. I couldn't figure it out.
Oh man, my heart breaks hearing that.
Oh, that was horrible. I couldn't work it out. This wasn't the first I used, but it's the first one I bought. But then I got a Roland D10, which is absolutely naff, really. Oh. And it was £895, and I was about 19, I think. Then I'd sold my decks for it and did 6 months of overtime, and I bought this synth. I've still got it, actually. And it was only because it was one of the first synths that allowed you that was multi-timbral, so you could play more than one sound at the same time, connected up to an old Atari ST. So, but £895 in 1989 was a lot of money. So yeah,
I think that's like $2 million today.
It probably is in Canadian dollars anyway.
Oh,
but,
yeah.
But yeah, it's it is. I mean, with Behringer, the stuff that they've got, I mean, like you take like the DeepMind 12, I mean, it was £1,000 or just over I paid. Got it from Thomann in Germany, and now you can pick it up for £600 for brand new off Amazon. It's amazing amount of money, really. I mean, yes, still £600 is a lot of money, if you don't have that kind of thing. But if you're out sort of, I was going to say if you're out weekends drinking, but nobody is these days, are they? Mind you, we are in the UK. We have been allowed out now from this week.
Really?
Yeah, we can't go to pubs or anything, but we are allowed out our houses. So that's one good thing.
Yeah, that's good. You can see sunlight. That's nice.
Yes, we can do.
Wow. Oh, I'm happy to hear that. I have just a few more questions. 5 synths over the years that you've really enjoyed. You don't have to have necessarily owned them. You could have played them or had it on borrow for a while. But any 5.
Any 5. The Moog Voyager. That's the one I miss. I never had a Mini Moog, but I had it was called the Mini Moog Voyager. I bought that off a guy actually not far from me, and I didn't have it for that long. But But I had to sell it to do this, really, to move and do this. But that was fantastic sounding synthesizer. You can only play one note, but it was a stereo filter, and it just had this tone to it, which was different from the Minimo, but it was just without the resonance, it was just monstrous. The house would shake. So that was one. Thinking back of all the ones I've had, a lot of the synths I had were very much sort of digital as well. I like the EX5, Yamaha EX5, that had lots of different synthesis, because for a turn around sort of 2000, there were quite a few synthesizers or workstations, whichever you want to call them, that had multiple different synthesis in there. So that it'd have FM, it'd have samples, it'd have analog modeling, it would have all these things. It's just the technology back then wasn't that powerful to do it very well. So yeah, EX5, DeepMind 12 for sure. OB6, I love the tone. For me personally, I've got other ones, but we recently went back to the OB6 because they announced the vintage knob functionality, which is, I don't know what they're doing, but it's changing the pitch and the filter and all this sort of stuff with this one sort of control. So I went back and did a bank of patches for that, for the OB6 and the Prophet 6 actually. But the OB6 just has this sound that I just love it. I just love that. It's a kind of the Prophet 6 is very it's a bit tame. It's more tamer, but the OB6 is like a wild horse is trying to control that tone. And I love that. And I guess the Moog 1, because it's the most expensive synth I've ever bought. And if I wasn't doing sound design, I very much doubt I would have bought it. Not because it's no good or anything like that, or not worth it. For me, it's definitely worth it. And it's easy for people to say they don't get it when they haven't tried it, because it isn't just the sound; it's the whole scale of it. I mean, inside the manual, it says, instead of like using the Moog 1, it says piloting the Moog 1, and that's exactly how you feel. It's all spaced out perfectly, and everything's and when you're sort of diving into a synthesizer rather than trying to do it through a little display, you're just so much more connected to it. And I'm able, and it can do 3 layers. That's how I use it. I mean, people think of it as 3-part multitimbral, which for an analog synth is good, but I use them as 3 separate layers or for splits. And I love, I've done 2 banks for that, and plus like Moog hired me, which was a great honor to, make sounds for them as well. So that's definitely, but out of all, yeah, if I needed to run out, it'd be the OB6 that would be under my arm.
The Moog 1, I really want to play in person, but we haven't had any stores open in the longest time where I'm at that have the Moog 1. And we did have a Moog shop on Queen Street West that closed down because of the pandemic, unfortunately. So it's I don't know when I'll be able to play one, but that's definitely on my wish list. But the OB6, I this is going to sound corny, but like I remember when I first heard the OB6 and when I was gassing really hard for like new hardware, I would put on the OB6 and I would not cry, but get extremely sentimental to the point where it's like I can imagine me actually owning this, playing it, and tears coming to my eyes. Like patch number 7, that EP piano was amazing. Yes. I used to go to the Steve's Music, which was close to my workplace, and I would at least 3 or 4 times a week during my lunch break, I'd be playing the OB6, talking to the workers and just playing, and it takes you somewhere.
No, you're certainly right. And my kind of approach with it's very easy to think, OB6, Oberheim, and make vintage sounds. I don't. It's a synthesizer to me. And things with like the polymod and using the second oscillator as an LFO source, so essentially you're left with just one oscillator. It's amazing what you can do. The tones that come out with what is really, if you think about it, a simple synth. There's not 5 LFOs and 3 or 4 envelopes and mod matrices. There's none of that. It's just purely the tone, and that's really what it's all about. yeah, I love making sounds for that. It's a pleasure. Some synths are a little bit harder. You have to dig hard. Rev 2 is a little bit like that. You have to dig to find the colourful corners of it.
Don't remind me.
Yeah, and even this to a degree, the polybrew I've been working on, that you have to dig in the corners to make it sound, for the way that I'm happy with it. I'm not just going to knock up, a sound and move on to the next one. I've got to like it. So I'm only slowly getting through making patches for them. Some of them I'm just deleting because it's now I don't like it. Yeah. But they all have their own, their own sound and tone, and it takes digging. Yeah.
I look forward to what you do with the Polybrute, because you seem to be one of the few that are actually sticking through with it, seeing the good that's within it, and like you're mining good out of it. Like I've heard you play some here and there. I've seen some videos on your channel, but like even for me, I was very impressed when I saw it. I had different emotions when I heard it, and I read a lot of people's opinion. Yeah, and like that's something where I don't want to be swayed by people's opinions online because they've been watching YouTube videos and they've never played it. You've actually played it and you're creating like sound patches from it. So I feel that like people like you guys have the authority once you spent a few months with it and you've really worked at it to actually determine what can this do, what can it sound like, what does it actually mean within the scope of all these other synths, and that will eradicate all of the opinions of people who listen 10 minutes and then decide to move on.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is, like I say, this is our sort of thing. People like talking about synths and not necessarily, what you kind of end. It's like anything, you have to take time to dig. And, when you've been doing this sort of thing, a sound designer for a while, you have a tool bag of tools that you pull out every now and again, to work on this sort of sound. And I'm looking for movement and shade and color, and some synths it's just a breeze to do that. Others you have to really, like I say, dig, and this is one that you have to dig around a little bit more.
What would you be doing in your life right now had you not decided to go all in with sound design and GEOSynths?
Oh God. Well, I think I would have carried on with the video side of things. I actually did some freelance work after I was laid off, and not much. And that was the idea, was to do that, but also to do it, with somebody else. But that didn't really pan out very well. So, I would have carried on with the video side of stuff because I enjoyed that, going and meeting different customers, finding out about the businesses. And as they're talking to me, I'm getting sparks and I'm seeing shots and ideas in my head. And then that's forming. There's a real creative aspect to it, which is kind of a bit like a muscle that I'm not really using anymore. So, there's those sort of challenges. And then when you finally go out and shoot it, it's like a day long a shoot, and then you get it back and you got all this footage, and then you compile it into something, that either works or doesn't work. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, it wasn't anything like movies or anything. It was, it could be like a lawyer's office or something like that. Not exactly the sexiest of subjects, but I think that was the challenge, because each time it was different. It could be a construction company, or it could be, whatever. So I think I would be carrying on doing that. Music would still have been a hobby. Yeah, I mean, it's been with me, as far as back as I can remember, growing up with it all around me. I'll be 3-4 years old, walk downstairs, and I'll be walking past drum kits and cables with guitars and everything. It's just in me. But then again, there is that challenge now, that when it is your work, that when you do have your downtime, you don't particularly want to turn a synth on. That's you want to get far away from it. So I suppose that's the downside of it, I guess. But no, video work.
Last question: how do you stay motivated for many people, especially within the YouTube community, music community, production, sound design, what have you, they get writer's block or they become creatively stagnated. What advice would you have for the sound designers, the YouTubers, and all of the other creatives of the world?
Well, I guess the easiest thing would say stick with it, but that doesn't really kind of help, does it? The truth is, there are times you're going to question yourself. You're going to question your motives for doing it. Your motives will probably change over time as well. It could be an interest at first, and then you get some feedback, and then you start changing to try and anticipate what you think people will like, but you don't know that. So, and you can get like a big focus group together and marketing team to work all that out, but still a guess at the end of the day whether something will work or not. So you've just got to stick at it, even when you don't feel like doing it. Procrastinating. There's times when I am procrastinating, and I don't want to do something, and I'm leaving it to the last minute. It seems to be part of my creative process. For lots of things that I have to have that period where I'm not doing anything. And I mean, like when I make a bank of sounds and put them out, you think that's the happiest time, but no, I go into a really bit of a depression actually, because that's finished. It's like, right, what do I do next? But I think that's quite different when you're actually doing it for a living, because you've got a lot of pressure on you. And as I mentioned before, when you try to compete with people using the same tools as you, but they're not official with what they're doing, they're not declaring their income, so they just charge peanuts. And then I'll get people going, well, he's charging only charging half what you charge. And I'm thinking, well, it's taken me 2 months to do that, and I'm charging you whatever $30 for that work I've done, and you've just spent 5-7 grand on that synth, and you're moaning at me about that. So they're things that sort of give you a kick up the backside, really, to keep going. But you're gonna have dark times with it all, I think. But there's always, you come out of it. You're not going to be just happy and everything's great. It's not going to happen, especially YouTube, because I think with YouTube, the reward has got to be for doing it. If you're doing it for, because you want to get praise or noticed, I don't know, get some lipstick and do some Instagram pictures or something for that. Because I'm certainly not in our game. I mean, really, there isn't a huge amount of people that there's Andrew, is it Huang? I can't remember. He's like, a couple of million people.
He's a legend around here. He's like a local legend.
Is he? Right. Yeah. I mean, his videos are very high quality. But he's a kind of bit of an outlier when it comes to our game. A lot of people are around the 50, 60, 70,000. And unless you're able to bring something totally new, I don't know. I mean, to a degree, yeah. With the Synth Show, kind of made itself up, but there was a bit of a formula to follow with Sonic State. End of the day, it was what much more can you do with a host and a couple of people to talk about the latest synths and then other topics. So it's a bit of it wasn't totally brand new to do, but it wasn't. I never planned on doing that. But I've noticed the past 12 months or more, there's been a lot more people doing live shows in different languages as well. But I don't worry about what other people do. I've got no control over it. I just concentrate on what I do. And if what I do isn't good enough, then, you just try something different, I suppose.
Jamie, thank you so much. This was an incredible conversation, and I feel that there was a lot that we can take away that will help with anyone who's starting something new or trying to get back into something, or they're not sure if they're going in the right direction. But even in this past hour and a half, I've heard from you tips that I think will help me. And just hearing your journey in general, it really does add a lot to what you do on a weekly basis and what you provide for us. So I want to say thank you so much. Thank you for continuing to stoke the flame of music and the love for synthesizers within me and within many others. And I know you're going to continue to grow and continue to have a lot of success with what you do.
Yeah, I mean, end of the day, it's good fun. I particularly enjoyed talking to different people and finding out their sort of story, and like I had you on. Yeah, let's see what happens in the future.
A lot of good things, I'm sure of it. Do you have anything that you would like to plug?
Yeah, well, only geosynths.com if you're interested in sounds, and you can sort of learn about a lot of people sort of buy sounds, to use in the tracks, but also to figure out how I did something. There's also I do have a Patreon, and I post sort of money off for the sort of sounds, but also Patreon only videos, sound design, free patches, that sort of thing. So you can check me out on there, or just join the show, Sunday show, Synth Show, and Synth Show in Facebook. Yeah.
Links will be in the description below. Thank you, Jamie, for coming by. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Take care.